I sat there, soulless, in front of the counseling Dr. Danny, saying nothing, even though he tried to persuade me to reveal everything hidden in my heart and promised to help. My vision began to blur, and when I opened my eyes again, the surrounding scenery had changed. The moonlight here was beautiful, but I felt it seemed unreal. The first thing I needed to do was go to my parents. I opened the room door and was startled. Just a moment ago, I was still in the hospital, but where was I now? A hallway full of cameras. I saw a line of text written on the wall at the end of the hallway, so I ran to see. The text reminded me to remember who I was, an angel or a prisoner. Only when I became self-aware would the door next to it open. Inside was a typewriter, which started working as soon as I entered. The first question it asked was my name. Next was why I was in the hospital. I didn't want to answer, but the machine kept urging me. So I fearfully recounted all the reasons I was there. First was why I was in the hospital. I had witnessed a death, seen someone harmed by criminals. That's why I was brought to the hospital for psychological treatment. I just wanted to escape and return to my parents. As soon as I finished speaking, the door to the next room opened, making me think it was the exit. But no, it only led to an elevator. Still confused, I stepped in. The moment the elevator doors closed, an announcement echoed, confirming I had been chosen as a sacrifice and reminding everyone on other floors to prepare. Where I just stood was floor B7. Currently, the elevator is taking me up to floor B6. And according to the announcement, floor B6 was called the playground. The elevator doors opened, and I had no choice but to step out. I quickly realized this was a building, and I would have to find a way to escape. I fumbled my way along the deserted path. A loud noise like something breaking startled me. Not knowing what it was, I needed to run first to be safe. I risked my life running to the end of the path. 2 fences behind and a large pool of blood terrified me, and a bird appeared on the window. I found it a bit strange for a bird to appear inside the building. But when I saw the injured bird, I gently took it down to treat it. But just then, a murderer appeared and chopped the small bird to death right before my eyes. This guy laughed loudly, then approached me, giving a reminder. He gave me 3 seconds to run away, to run to a distant place while screaming and begging for my life. Only then would he be satisfied. This pervert laughed loudly and then started counting without further explanation. Frightened, I turned and ran immediately. I slipped into a room and closed the door. I looked around and immediately chose a hiding spot. Soon after, that murderer tracked my scent with a large, long scythe in his hand. He slashed the door once, then peered inside. Then he kicked the door open and slowly entered the room to check. I fearfully covered my mouth, trying not to make any sound. The murderer swung his scythe down right where I was hiding. Luckily, it didn't hit me, just grazed my hair slightly. Hearing no scream from me, he muttered that perhaps I wasn't hiding there and left. I peeked out of the barrel to check. After confirming he was gone, I climbed out. Before he returned, I had to find a safer hiding place. Despite saying that, I still returned to where the bird was killed, praying for its soul to rest in peace. Looking closer, I realized this bird didn't look like its species at all. So from my pocket, I took out a needle and thread, deciding to make it my own bird. After finishing, I prayed one last time, then left. All my actions were watched by the murderer through the cameras. I ran to a room just as he appeared from behind. This time, he gave me no more time, but directly swung his scythe to attack. I tried my best to run towards the elevator, escaping him just in time. The elevator took me to the next floor. Unlike the desolate floor below, this place reminded me of the hospital corridor. As soon as I stepped out, I heard a strange sound, making me think the murderer was chasing me. So I ran frantically, but it wasn't him. It was Danny, who ran up and grabbed my hand, trying to reassure me. Danny was waiting for me on this floor, and he assured me that the murderer who had just chased me couldn't come up here. After that, the two of us went together to find an exit. The hallway was blocked by a very thick tempered glass panel. So Danny turned to comfort me first. There's no need to worry because he's here. If I stay calm and cooperate with him to find an exit, good things will happen. This path is blocked. So Danny led me to another room. There was a message on the wall reminding me to remember my true nature, to remember what I desired. And if that was truly my wish, then there was no reason to keep me here any longer. However, there was one thing I needed to comply with, and that was the law. I confusedly turned to ask Danny. According to him, there were some unwritten rules in this building. And as for desires, everyone has them. He used himself as an example. Since childhood, his eyes had been weak. Therefore, he had wished for beautiful eyes like mine. As soon as he finished speaking, his face became sinister. Then he dragged me into the operating room. Danny smiled, asking me to give him my eyes, which terrified me. Seeing this, Danny showed disappointment because beautiful eyes shouldn't hold fear. At this moment, Danny asked me to help him with something, Behind the room they were standing in, there was another room containing something Danny wanted me to get for him. Seeing that I didn't seem to remember, Danny hinted at some kind of chemical. Although I still didn't understand anything, I was forced to go. Stepping into the pitch black room, I was startled to discover it was filled with artificial eyes. At this moment, Danny appeared behind me, reminding me of their meeting outside the hospital. I still remember nothing. Then, at Danny's request, I handed him the eyes from behind me. Danny smiled, reminding me that he was going to get his artificial eyes fitted, and I had to wait here. If I dared to escape, I would regret it. By now, I had confirmed it. This guy was not the Danny I knew. I had to get out of here. The door was locked tight, so I picked up an iron bar from the floor, trying to pry it open. Finally, I succeeded. But just then, Danny appeared behind me. As he had warned before, if I dared to escape, I would suffer the consequences. Danny forced me onto the bed, then flashed savage smiles. Terrified, I tried to beg him to spare me. I had to return to my parents. Danny continued to smile cheerfully, comforting me not to worry because my parents were already waiting in hell. Just as he was about to pluck my eyes out, the murderer from floor B6 suddenly appeared, swinging his scythe and killing him instantly. After that, this murderer laughed manically, giving me another chance to escape. But by now, I had lost all will and just lay motionless. This guy also had a rule not to kill those who had lost their will to live, just like me. At this moment, an announcement sounded. Since the floor B6 murderer had violated the B5 floor's rule of killing people, he would become a sacrifice, meaning from now on, he would be hunted. After that, the murderer also left immediately, ignoring me. I remained motionless. In my subconscious, I now knew I shouldn't live anymore. The murderer went to the elevator and kicked it hard, but the elevator still wouldn't open for him to escape. Just then, I stepped out in front of him. I clasped my hands, asking him for a favor, which was to kill me. Hearing this, the murderer immediately vomited. He cursed at me, saying he had no time to play with lunatics like me. If I was free, then I should open the door behind. I still tried to beg him. If I opened the door, would he kill me? The murderer neither refused nor agreed, only urged me to quickly open the door if I could. I understood and turned to run elsewhere. I went straight to Danny's room. He had just said this was his floor. Just as the murderer was kicking the door, it opened. I had taken the key from Danny's pocket and brought it here. Seeing how clever and quick-witted I was, the murderer complimented me. Then, he placed the scythe against my neck. At my request, he promised to kill me. But first, both of us had to escape this hell. If they could get out of here, I would surely be happier, and that's when he would kill me. At this moment, the murderer asked my name. He introduced himself as Zach. Zach specifically reminded me not to do anything too excited because he was compelled to kill people with joy, but it would probably be fine. Zach turned and stepped into the elevator. My soulless eyes gave the answer. Standing in the elevator, Zach started asking me about that Danny guy. I didn't answer, but asked Zach in return. Of course, Zach knew nothing about that Danny guy. He just simply wanted to kill people. That's all. The elevator doors opened. They had arrived at floor B4. Zach continued to move forward. At this moment, I spoke up to remind Zach that I had found something in the water. Zach didn't care, only urged me to leave quickly. I had thought Zach must be very familiar with this building. But Zach's answer was completely different from my thoughts. He came here just to satisfy his hobby of killing, and Zach was sure that the guys on the other floors had similar hobbies. I followed behind Zach. A moment later, what appeared before Zach's eyes made him a little confused, but I immediately recognized that this was a graveyard. No wonder it smelled of earth. Zach sighed. Then he continued to tell me to follow him. Seeing me staring intently at the grave made Zach angry, but by this time I was ready to lie in it, so Zach didn't bother to touch me. After walking a bit further, a tombstone with inscriptions appeared. Zach couldn't read, so he had me translate for him. It read, "Welcome, good people, to the Lord's land. The chosen ones will depart in his warm embrace, while the traitors will be imprisoned here forever." I walked to the largest tombstone. There were also inscriptions on it, and it was my name. Someone had already prepared this grave for me. This made Zach uncomfortable, as if I was destined to die here. He raised his scythe, wanting to destroy this grave, but fearing he would damage the scythe, he stopped. Zach turned and urged me to follow, but I just stood still. Zach was now very angry and pressed the scythe to my neck. He didn't want to die here with me. After getting out, he would fulfill my wish, so stop being stupid. I pointed behind the grave. There was a narrow crevice. I volunteered to go in there to find a way out. Zach was a little worried I would run away. But looking into those lifeless eyes, plus my assurance that I wouldn't run, Zach could only sigh and allow me to go. I also asked Zach to stay here and continue searching. There might be secret mechanisms they didn't know about. Zach immediately yelled, refusing. He couldn't even read, so how could he discover secret mechanisms? But I still believed Zach could do it. Before crawling inside, I specifically told Zach one last thing. If possible, I hoped Zach wouldn't destroy my grave. Stepping into the tunnel, lights flickered along with someone's maniacal laughter. Yet, I wasn't scared at all and kept moving forward. At the end of the path was a locked door that I couldn't open. There were a few items around, so I checked them immediately. I broke the seal on a board with a letter attached. These letters were left here for me to read. In the letter, the mysterious person was eager to meet me but was prevented by the guys on the other floors. Therefore, to welcome me to this floor, he personally created a grave for me so I could rest here forever. Outside, Zach found a pickaxe, smashed a tombstone, and immediately went mad, joyfully smashing other graves. Somehow, the flying debris hit a hidden mechanism, so the door blocking my way was opened. I didn't hesitate to continue deeper inside. I found a room that looked like a filing room. On the table was a file clearly stating all the information about the victims in this building. There were even documents about me and that Zach guy. Outside, Zach was still furiously smashing everything. Everything had been destroyed by him, except for my grave. Zach raised the pickaxe, intending to strike, but then remembered my warning. So Zach stopped and threw the pickaxe away. Just then, I returned and told Zach everything. I held out Zach's information sheet and began to read it in front of him. Zach's face darkened as he pressed the scythe to my neck and asked me after reading all of this, "How do I feel? Am I afraid of him?" I calmly replied that of course, I wasn't afraid. So Zach told me a story. Once upon a time, there was also a person who answered exactly like me, but when he chased after her, that girl panicked and ran away. If you're not scared, why run? He hated liars. So he sent that girl to heaven immediately. After listening, I still didn't understand Zach's meaning through this story. Did he mean that if I ran, he would kill me? Well, that's great. Hearing this, Zach remembered that I had asked him to kill me. The story earlier was really irrelevant. Zach changed the subject. Is it possible that I walked for so long and only found this little information? Of course not. I also discovered another door, but I couldn't open it, which is why I came back here. There was also someone's voice saying that he knew what I wished for. At this moment, Zach had picked up the pickaxe. My grave doesn't belong here, so why keep it? I can only die when he escapes this place. Zach ignored me and smashed my grave. Then he nonchalantly walked away. My face darkened, but I still had to follow him. At the elevator, it was still locked and they couldn't open it, so I pointed down into the water. There might be something down there. Zach should go down and look. Suddenly, I called Zach. I was curious if Zach would really kill me. Zach got angry and cursed at me. He would do what he promised, and if I was in a hurry, I should just commit suicide quickly. I immediately refused. I couldn't do that, because God taught that suicide is a very great sin. Hearing this, Zach turned around and asked me to do something. If I could cry or laugh now, he would kill me immediately. So I tried to force a smile, but my lifeless eyes couldn't interest Zach. He sent me away to continue searching elsewhere, so I fumbled in the hallway from earlier. Suddenly, a letter with a flower appeared on the ground. I clearly remembered it wasn't here earlier. I picked it up to read immediately. Meanwhile, Zach found the water too cold and couldn't stand it anymore. He returned to the grave to wait for me. Seeing that I was taking too long, he wondered if I had run away. Then he immediately denied it because earlier, looking into my lifeless eyes, Zach knew I truly wanted to die. Just then, all the lights in the area went out, accompanied by maniacal laughter. From the darkness, a bucket-headed guy appeared, blaming Zach for destroying the graves here. The bucket-headed guy had put a lot of effort into creating a grave for Zach. Yet Zach had the heart to destroy it. What a waste. Zach laughed, saying it was just a shabby grave. This kid crossed his arms, walked past Zach's face, and argued that for him, it was a very suitable grave for Zach. Zach became angry. If he liked graves so much, he would put him in one first. Zach swung his scythe to attack, but the kid dodged it. At this moment, he reminded Zach once again that his name was Eddie. Don't call him a kid anymore. Zach had already destroyed my grave, so Eddie decided to make another one for me. Zach continuously attacked, while Eddie only dodged and told Zach about himself. From the first time he met me, Eddie had loved me. However, all Eddie could do was build graves for the dead. But that's all. This kid couldn't feel their emotions at all. To Eddie, those who lay within were simply ugly. On the contrary, I brought him an intense emotion that Eddie called love. That's why Eddie wanted to create a beautiful grave for me, so I could lie in that beautiful grave. Eddie had his goal. He was the one who would kill me. Zach didn't care about this Eddie's perverse hobbies. He swung his scythe to attack again, but Eddie still only dodged and vanished into the darkness. The lights in the area came back on, but Eddie had disappeared somewhere. Meanwhile, I had returned to the filing room. Unlike before, the locked door was now open, revealing a dark hallway behind it. But somehow a flashlight had been prepared for me on the shelf. This would be very useful. I picked it up and continued deeper inside. After walking a bit further, I discovered another letter on the ground. I picked it up to read. the letter still contained the familiar comforting words. Eddie knew what I wished for, and if I truly wanted to die, he would help me fulfill that wish. I just needed to say yes. Just as I finished reading this, Eddie spoke up and appeared behind me. I was a little scared and backed away. Eddie calmly encouraged me not to be afraid. He wouldn't kill me senselessly like the people on the other floors, especially Zach, a killer with no aesthetic sense whatsoever. Eddie opened his arms to welcome me, revealing to me that he knew everything about me, from my parents to my friends. Therefore, I didn't need to worry about anything. I still didn't understand why I had to come here. Seeing that I had forgotten, Eddie didn't want to explain. The important thing now was that he would help me fulfill my wish. I just needed to say yes. Outside the grave area, Zach had waited long enough. He had also realized that Kid Eddie was trying to distract him through the crevice I had entered. Zach had tried calling, but no one answered. Zach really wanted to go inside, but the passage was too small. He couldn't squeeze through. I kept backing away from Eddie. Eddie kept dragging the shovel closer to me, advising me that he would fulfill my wish, so there was no need for Zach anymore. I was still very hesitant, because if I died here, Zach would not be able to escape this building either. As for Zach, after trying every way but unable to enter that gap, Zach had to run to find another way. He reached a dead end, and suddenly heard my voice from the other side of the wall. So Zach pounded on the wall and called for me. Hearing Zach's voice made Eddie furious, so Eddie turned to me and gave me a choice. Did I want Zach to kill me or for him to kill me? Eddie even knelt down, inviting me, promising to give me the most beautiful death. Eddie's words made me trust him. I reached out my hand and almost took his. Standing on the other side of the wall, Zach heard everything and cursed Eddie. Killing someone who has lost the will to live, like me, is not beautiful at all. Then he told me that there were many people in this building who wanted to kill me, but Zach would not allow that to happen because he had sworn to God that he was the one who would kill me. Hearing this, I realized and asked Zach to break down the wall. Zach shattered the wall, and that was also when little Eddie disappeared. Hiding in the shadows, he seemed very disappointed in me, but still gave me one more chance for him. Zach only wants to dirty me, so he will definitely wait for me somewhere else before killing me. After Eddie's voice faded completely, I, with soulless eyes, kept asking Zach about his previous promise. Zach angrily pushed me against the wall, declaring that he hated lying and that he would do what he said. Now I understood. I will try to be useful so that Zach will kill me. After that, they continued on. Eddie said he would wait for me, so I will definitely meet that kid again. As expected, after moving for a while, they met Eddie. Eddie was now very sad because I had not chosen him to end my life. For me, the reason was very simple, because Zach had sworn to God that he would kill me, but Eddie didn't believe in God. In this building, there would never be things like choice and freedom. Eddie's job was simply to kill people, and currently, I was on his floor. By this point, there were no more choices. Eddie lunged to attack, wanting to take my life. Of course, Zach wouldn't let him do whatever he wanted. Zach was very strong. Eddie knew that. However, this was his floor, and he would have a much greater advantage over Zach. The lights in the room went out, plunging everything into darkness. A gravedigger like Eddie could see in this area, but Zach could not. Eddie, with his advantage, both hit and taunted Zach. Zach could only swing his scythe wildly, then irritably called for me to flip the switch. Eddie tried to stop me, but for some reason, Zach suddenly blocked Eddie's way, which greatly impressed the kid. This must be what people call fighting instinct. I ran straight up to find the light switch. At this moment, I saw a grave covered in flowers there. Suddenly, little Eddie appeared and punched me in the stomach. This grave was dug by him as a gift from me. After I lay down there, Eddie promised to make me a beautiful tombstone. I fell straight into the grave. "What a beautiful sight," Eddie exclaimed, and prepared to kill me. Just then, I suddenly turned on the flashlight in my hand, shining it directly into Eddie's face, blinding him. I rushed forward, snatched the controller from Eddie's hand, and turned on the room lights. Just then, Zach appeared and defeated Eddie. This meant Eddie had lost. Zach killed the kid immediately with one swing of his scythe. Then, he kicked the tombstone, covering up that coffin. The scene became quiet once more. Zach spoke first, urging me to find the elevator. Eddie could completely control the light and shadows in this room thanks to the controller, so I also guessed the elevator switch was here. I randomly pressed the button, and the nearby waterfall stopped flowing, revealing a direct path to the elevator for them. Standing inside, I repeatedly asked Zach if I had done well. At this moment, Zach finally gave me a compliment. As promised, when both of them escaped this building, Zach would grant me death. The elevator stopped on floor B3, not going directly to the top floor but stopping midway like this, which made Zach a bit uncomfortable. I stepped out to check. This place looked like a prison. Blocking their way was a locked iron gate. I turned back and told Zach, Of course, he already knew about this problem. But this was something I needed to solve. So I thought for a moment, then reached into my pocket. This made Zach very curious about what I had in my pocket. It was a needle and thread, I exclaimed, making Zach think I had the ability to pick locks like a thief. There's no way I know that skill. Furthermore, these iron bars don't even have keyholes to open. Zach was now very annoyed and pushed me aside. He swung his scythe at the iron bars, but they were too strong. Zach couldn't do anything more. Just then, the prison alarm rang. A machine gun lowered from the ceiling, startling Zach. Luckily, Zach reacted quickly and pulled me back, saving my life. Following that was a sweet laugh, welcoming Zach and me to her prison. She introduced herself as the judge. And in this prison, she had the right to decide Zach's fate. Zach was angry and yelled that he didn't care what she wanted. He demanded that she open the door for them immediately. She agreed right away. Zach's quick reaction and skills were enough to pass the first gate. Light shone on their faces along with celebratory fireworks. And then the iron bars opened for them to pass. I was a bit bewildered to be called a criminal. Zach didn't care about this, he just urged me to follow quickly. Walking further down the cell block, I tried to open a few rooms, but all of them were locked. So Zach got angry, looked directly into the camera, and started cursing the stupid judge. If she didn't open the door, how could they leave? She calmly replied to Zach. Looking at Zach like that, he isn't very patient, is he? He's already making demands before she's even finished her makeup. They need to know this is a prison, and they are criminals. As criminals, they must endure punishment. At this moment, the female judge opened a room for them. The first punishment began. In this room, there was a camera, and their first task was to take mugshots as criminals. How to take the photos was up to Zach and me, but of course, they also had to wear name tags, so they reluctantly had to take the photos. I gently wrote and hung the name tag for Zach. He was unwilling, constantly fidgeting, which made me have to remind him repeatedly. If he didn't stand still, the photo would be blurry. After Zach's photo was taken, it was my turn. Zach didn't know how to take pictures, so the photo he took of me was even blurrier than a low-quality movie. Zach didn't care and held the photo up to the camera. Yet the female judge still let them pass. Entering a new hallway, there were many different drawings on the walls. Zach found them too ugly and criticized them. The female judge scolded Zach. These were all drawings she had put effort into creating. Moreover, they were not just senseless drawings. These drawings depicted various punishments for Zach and me. The female judge allowed them to freely choose the next punishment. Zach didn't care and pulled me forward. Opening a room door, Zach let me go in to check first. Inside were wooden dolls. After Zach stepped in, the room door also closed. Zach was angry, demanding that I do something. I said I would be useful, didn't I? Having no other choice, I had to obey Zach and search for a mechanism while Zach could only sit aside and complain. But I searched everywhere and found no mechanism. Zach was very angry and wanted to destroy the dolls in this room. I didn't want that because there was no guarantee of what would happen, so Zach immediately found a chair to sit on. I, still expressionless, advised him to stand up immediately because this was an electric chair used for execution. As soon as I finished speaking, the lights in the room went out. A curtain was drawn to cover where Zach was sitting. By the time it was opened, Zach was securely locked in the chair. Immediately after, a TV was lowered. The female judge appeared on screen, introducing herself once again as Kathy, welcoming them to the next punishment. Seeing Zach sitting in the electric chair, Kathy laughed like crazy. Zach demanded Kathy release him, but why would she release a criminal? Kathy pressed a button, and Zach was immediately electrocuted. But after that shock, Zach was still alive, which only made Kathy more interested. Not just a murderer, Zach was also a monster. Like this, she had to give Zach a chance to live. The one who would decide Zach's fate would be me. If I could solve it, Kathy would release Zach. However, while I solved the puzzle, she would continue to electrocute Zach. Kathy gave me a hint. The dolls now started to move. In this room, the audience's gaze would decide Zach's fate. No sooner had she spoken than Kathy activated the electric current, making Zach scream in pain. I grabbed Zach's side, and after thinking for a moment, I knew what I had to do. One by one, I hacked the dolls, heads with the side until the last one was destroyed. And then the electric current stopped. Seeing Zach sitting motionless, I thought he was dead. I ran to call Zach. And Zach finally sprang up, blaming me for being too slow. Zach was still alive, which eased my worries. If Zach died, I would be in trouble. Zach picked up his scythe, then slashed the screen, swearing he would kill that damn Kathy. Kathy laughed maniacally through the camera. Thanks to my efforts, she decided to let Zach through this door. But in her prison, there was more than just one type of punishment. There were many more. Zach should take his time enjoying them. Zach sighed and pulled me forward. The door he was about to enter had a skull symbol outside. But this was already the only way. Knowing it was dangerous, they still had to go inside. I followed Zach. As soon as they entered, the room door closed. After checking for a while, there was only one corpse in this room. Kathy once again appeared on screen and began explaining the task to them. This was a specially designed room by her, preventing the air inside from escaping, and she would slowly pump poison gas into this room. If Zach and I didn't want to die, they had to find a way out of here. Of course, to add to the drama, she would set a time limit and only leave them one gas mask. Zach immediately gave it to me, but I didn't need it because it would obstruct my vision. When the poison gas was pumped into the room, I started calculating. In the entire room, there was only one corpse. So I also guessed this was the clue I found writing under the corpse. Therefore, I asked Zach to kick the corpse aside. This writing clearly stated the corpse's crime and the method for atonement. This criminal had used his right leg to beat others. Therefore, he had to atone by chopping off his own right leg. On the table, there was also a scale. So Zach, at my command, chopped off the leg and placed it on the scale. Then, I tried to find something of equivalent weight to the leg, making the scale balance, but nothing happened, forcing me to recalculate. Perhaps I missed something. Having inhaled too much poison gas, I started panting. Seeing me cover my mouth made Kathy laugh maniacally, as if she was gloating. Nothing suited a criminal more than writhing in pain. My vision blurred. I couldn't breathe. I collapsed, wondering if I would die here. Zach appeared, pulling me to my feet. I still had a purpose, so he couldn't let me die here. Zach put the gas mask on me so I could continue working. I looked around the room. I must have missed something. Looking closer, I discovered a vent on the ceiling, so Zach lifted me, throwing me straight up there to check. I started crawling through the tunnel. At the end of the path, I found a card and returned to Zach, handing him the key card to open the prison door, then fainted. Zach, annoyed, snatched the card and ran to open the door. But because he was too clumsy, he broke the card in half. At this moment, Kathy laughed maniacally, mocking Zach. Zach demanded she open the door immediately because they had already solved the puzzle. Of course, Kathy didn't. Rules were rules, and they had just destroyed the only way to escape that cell. Their waiting time was over. Kathy began pumping her deadliest poison gas into the room. At this moment, I looked up and asked Zach if I had been useful to him yet. Zach didn't care much and continued to scold me. I could only die once he had escaped this building. I understood, although I wasn't sure. This might be the last resort. I rummaged in my pocket. I guess this was some kind of flammable gas. A sticky mine fell out of my pocket, but having inhaled too much poison gas, I fainted again. Zach had to quickly pick up the bomb and blow up the entire room. Fortunately, everything I had guessed was completely accurate. The gas was flammable, so the destructive power of the bomb upon explosion was much greater. It blew off the prison door. Zach triumphantly pulled me out, forcing Kathy to praise him. To reward their recent efforts, she unlocked the next path for them. Zach quickly led me away, but because I was too slow, Zach urged me several times, yet I remained very sluggish, advising Zach that if he couldn't wait, he could go ahead. Zach got angry and scolded me. If he could do that, why would he need to take me with him? If you want to die, then be more useful. I understood. I wanted to ask Zach to rest for a moment so my head would stop spinning. With no other choice, Zach found a hidden corner to take me to rest. Sitting there, the surveillance cameras wouldn't be able to see this place. I drifted off to sleep. My face was pale as if I were dying, which disheartened Zach. At this moment, his vision also gradually blurred, perhaps because he, too, had inhaled too much poison gas. Zach clicked his tongue and also fell asleep. When he was young, Zach was adopted by an elderly couple. This couple specialized in adopting abandoned children, then not taking proper care of them until they died. The husband remained indifferent. Meanwhile, the wife was tired of digging graves for those children, so the old man immediately had an idea. Wasn't Zach still alive? Let Zach do it. So in the pouring rain, Zach, still tiny, had to carry a shovel to dig graves for people his own age. Dreaming up to this point, Zach was awakened by me. He was quite angry because I had made him dream of these painful memories again. Zach impatiently urged me to continue the journey if I had rested enough. Both stepped into the hallway. Then Kathy's voice rang out again. She was curious where Zach and I had gone. Of course, Zach wouldn't tell her, so Kathy started mocking Zach. The two went together, both selfish, only wanting to use each other to achieve their own goals. But here, who was the tool for the other to control? To find the answer, they needed to participate in the next challenge. Zach walked away annoyed. Then I had my leg grabbed by a prisoner in a cell. Zach rushed over, kicked the prisoner's hand, then reassured me that he would rot and die in there anyway, so there was no need to worry. A moment later, they arrived at the next challenge room. Here, Kathy had prepared a dollhouse. She appeared on screen to explain the rules of the game to them. In this challenge, both would have to divide tasks. Who was the guide and who was the executor? I immediately took on the role of guide and went to the shelf to get the questions. I calculated very quickly and ordered Zach to place the male doll on the sofa. Next was the female doll, next to the man whom Kathy kept mentioning on TV to taunt Zach. And Zach seemed very annoyed having to do these things. The next command, I asked Zach to place a bandaged doll in front of the woman, then put a black bag in its hand. At this command, Zach was furious. He raised his scythe, wanting to smash this dollhouse, but I stopped him. Kathy also spoke up, advising Zach. If he didn't comply, Zach would never escape from here. Zach was very angry, but could do nothing but obey me. After placing the black bag in the doll's hand, next was the shovel. And this was exactly what Zach had to go through when he was young. Zach had to dig graves while the elderly couple sat in the house laughing maniacally. To them, Zach was just a tool, a useful tool, so they would let Zach continue to live. This was enough. Zach couldn't take it anymore and swung his scythe, smashing the dollhouse. Kathy was a bit reluctant, but didn't care. Anyway, the place she had set up for Zach was already complete. Zach and I were taken to the next room, and now Kathy appeared before them for the first time. Zach demanded she release him immediately while I wanted to know what the challenge in this room would be. Kathy pointed to a table that had been prepared. On it were 2 different syringes. Only one syringe was harmless. The other syringe contained the strongest poison. They would have to choose to inject one of the 2 syringes to the last drop. Then the door would open for them to continue. Kathy didn't explain anything further, then turned and left. Zach, annoyed, quickly asked me if I knew which one was harmless, but I didn't know this, so I wanted to use both quickly. Zach got angry and yelled at me. Am I crazy? Using both syringes would surely kill me. Then how would he escape this building? I bowed my head, only able to apologize. The more Zach looked, the more annoyed he became. He grabbed my neck, lifting me up to let me know that here, both of us were tools. He hated my dying face. However, this time, Zach volunteered to be my tool. With that, he took the syringe from my hand and directly injected all of it into himself. The cell door opened immediately afterward. Zach staggered through the corridor. His head began to spin. Zach cursed Kathy. Because of her, he had to recall those painful memories. At this moment, I ran to see if Zach was okay. Zach just stood still, then suddenly put his scythe to my neck. At this moment, he only wanted to kill and kill. Of course, I would voluntarily let Zach kill me. But before letting Zach do that, I needed to ask Zach one more time. Is this what Zach wants? If I die, how can Zach escape this building? Zach yelled loudly, grabbing my neck. At this point, I still have to teach him. I don't think so. I still persistently reminded Zach if that's what Zach wants. I am completely willing to let Zach kill me. Looking at my lifeless face, Zach smiled once more and lowered his scythe. He whispered in my ear, reminding me that he hates lying the most, and asked me not to do anything that would make him kill me right now. After speaking, Zach pushed me away forcefully. While Zach was digging a grave, that couple happily sat watching TV. At this moment, Zach had dug up a white skeleton from underground. He didn't know how long the wife had buried this. Zach gritted his teeth, threw the shovel, and went into the house. At this time, the old couple had gone to sleep. The TV was still playing the perverted movie that the husband loved, a movie about a cold-blooded killer. Zach stood stunned, watching that movie. Then he smiled. This is exactly what he needed to do. So Zach sneaked into the kitchen to get a knife. Under the dim moonlight, Zach massacred the old couple without any remorse. Back to reality, when Zach pushed me away, I immediately understood Zach's meaning and turned to run. Zach currently is not like what I know. I ran away not because I wanted to live, but because this was Zach's wish, so I couldn't die here. Zach was losing his mind because of the drugs. He held the scythe with an evil smile while chasing me. I could only run. I stumbled but still tried to get up and keep running. Finally, I ran into a room, but this room was a dead end. I couldn't run anymore. I stopped to let Zach put the scythe to my neck, accepting the death that was very close. Then, at this very moment, a gun fired along with Kathy's laughter. Zach was shot in the hand and could no longer hold the scythe. Kathy appeared behind the bulletproof glass, greeting everyone, welcoming them to her execution room. Inside, it was equipped with many guns, and if Kathy just pressed a button, Zach and I would immediately become a beehive. Kathy laughed maniacally, praising Zach's performance as excellent. What could be more wonderful than watching 2 people kill each other? Frankly, she was very impressed with Zach. Impressed with how Zach lost control due to drugs and chased his companion. The more she spoke, the angrier Zach became. He completely ignored me as his target and carried the scythe to strike the bulletproof glass. Kathy reminded Zach that he was aiming at the wrong person. But at this moment, Zach didn't care. He continued to attack, so Kathy shot Zach in the leg, making him fall. I worriedly ran to check on Zach, but he pushed me away. Zach was shot twice. It seemed as pain helped him sober up a bit. Then Kathy turned to call me. She snapped her fingers and the room lights went out. When the lights came on, a revolver appeared in front of me. To balance the forces, Kathy specially gave me this gun so that Zach and I could kill each other, and the final winner would be rewarded by Kathy with an even more brutal punishment. While Kathy laughed like crazy, I spoke up and asked her, "What is the purpose of all this?" My question made Kathy lose interest. She sat down and explained to me, "A criminal is asking about the purpose of punishment. There is no such thing as a purpose, so Zach and I just need to entertain her." I bent down to pick up the gun. Zach also tried to stand up. "If I want to shoot, then shoot quickly," Zach urged me. Kathy kept provoking me. After thinking for a while, I still couldn't shoot Zach. This made Zach very angry and he yelled at me. Currently, he cannot control his bloodlust. "If I don't shoot, I will die." Zach pulled the gun to his chest, giving me another chance. But my answer was still no. This is my choice. If I kill Zach, I will gain nothing for myself. And most importantly, I don't want to obey the Kathy's orders, because Zach and I are not her tools. To kill or be killed is up to us. I pulled Zach's side to my neck. Zach couldn't hold back anymore and yelled at me. He wanted to kill me when I was smiling. I tried to force a smile, then disgusted Zach. My fake smile was not genuine. It was betrayed by my dead-like eyes. But if it were a genuine smile, Zach would surely find it beautiful. Just imagining killing me at that moment was enough to make Zach feel happy. After speaking, he turned aside and stabbed himself in the stomach. Zach fell in front of me, annoying Kathy. She opened the bulletproof glass to yell loudly. She thought Zach was an ideal criminal, but she was wrong. Zach was just a suicidal failure who satisfied his own desires. As for me, Kathy stepped forward and pointed at me. I had destroyed her judgment. Kathy was very disappointed that I didn't dare to shoot. Has there ever been a criminal who didn't dare to shoot? Just as Kathy was about to punish me, Zach whimpered weakly. He was still alive despite suffering so many injuries, which excited Kathy very much. She rushed forward and kicked Zach in the face. This is exactly what she needed in a criminal. Seeing Kathy torturing Zach like that, I couldn't stand it anymore. I raised the gun, demanding Kathy release Zach immediately. With the gun pointed directly at her face, that wretched Kathy still wasn't scared, still brazenly provoking me to shoot her. The reason she was so confident was because the gun she gave me from the start had no bullets. Kathy pressed the remote control, her machine gun simultaneously pointed at me. With a bang, Kathy shot the gun I was holding out of my hand, then went back to torturing Zach again. At this moment, Zach was very weak, but as long as he wasn't dead, it was fine. Kathy decided she would treat Zach's wounds, then give him an even more brutal punishment. Watching Kathy torture Zach, painful memories came back to me. I could do anything, but don't touch Zach. I couldn't stand it anymore and pulled out another revolver from my pocket. My revolver definitely had bullets, yet that wretched Kathy was still very confident because she believed I wouldn't dare to shoot. Just as she finished speaking, a gunshot rang out, planting a bullet directly into the stomach of that wretched Kathy. Even though she was shot, this woman was still very arrogant. She herself didn't expect me to dare to shoot like that. But it's okay. This isn't enough to kill her. She raised the remote control, preparing to press the button for the machine guns to shoot at me. But at this very moment, Zach struggled up and cut off her arm. Even after being shot, he was still so happy. This attitude is what awakened Zach. Kathy coughed up blood, but still kept cursing Zach. But at this moment, Zach didn't care anymore. He struck Kathy with another blow to kill her completely. Yet, she was still alive. How interesting. With one arm severed and half her body slashed, Kathy was bleeding profusely, but still tried to crawl to her severed arm holding the remote control, but she died before she could activate it. Everything was over. I ran to check on Zach's condition. Zach, while holding his wound, praised me for doing a great job. Killing that wretched Kathy was enough to satisfy Zach. So the wound in his stomach was nothing. Zach urged me to quickly follow. They both found their way to Kathy's control room. The back door was blocked, but I quickly guessed that Kathy used the equipment here to control. In just a moment, I found a way to open the door. Both continued to walk. At this moment, I found a clue on the wall. They needed to proclaim their names to God to open the next door. Zach was curious, but I didn't bother to answer. After walking a bit further, Zach began to notice that something was wrong. I also realized they were returning to the starting point. Before I could think, Zach heard a sound. They both ran into the first room where they took photos, and it turned out the elevator door was behind their photo background. I looked around for a while. There was no mechanism to open the door. At this moment, I remembered the reminder on the wall just now. They needed to proclaim their names to God. I saw a place next to it to put something of the right size for their name tag, so I put Zach's name tag there. Sure enough, the elevator door opened. My name tag was still left, but I didn't need it anymore. I threw it away without hesitation. Sitting in the elevator, Zach praised me again. I did a great job daring to shoot that wretched Kathy. Then, Zach asked about my gun. Zach knew it wasn't the gun Kathy gave me. This is my self-defense weapon. I always carry it in my pocket, but I don't want to use it. Suicide is a sin against God. I will only die if Zach kills me. At this, Zach smiled at me for the first time. He didn't know whether to call me smart or stupid, but at least I did a great job shooting that damn Kathy. Finally, the elevator reached floor B2. I stood up and called Zach to get ready to go, but didn't hear Zach reply. I turned to look, and Zach had fainted from too much blood loss. I tried my best to drag Zach out of the elevator, leaving a trail of blood behind. Because Zach was too heavy, I had to lean him against the wall, then kept calling Zach's name. Zach woke up, saw they had arrived, and wanted to get up and keep going. But at this point, even a small movement made the wound in his stomach bleed profusely. I didn't allow Zach to continue. My worried expression made Zach very confused. Before he could tease me, Zach fainted again. I knew Zach wasn't dead, just unconscious. I couldn't carry Zach, so I decided to go find medicine for him alone. I randomly chose a room and walked in. It was very dark inside, but for Zach, I still had to go. Suddenly, the candles in the room flared up. One candle fell and emitted purple smoke. I was startled, wondering what kind of smoke could taste so sweet. I blinked again and everything was gone. In front of me was a pedestal with a book on it. I approached to examine the situation. In that book were questions asking me to declare my name and sins because God hates liars. So if I dared to lie, I would not be forgiven. The first question was my name. I stood before the door, read my name aloud, and the door immediately opened. Although I didn't understand, I had to continue inside. Going a little further, what appeared before me was a chair and a bottle of medicine. Mysterious lines of text floated in the air, demanding that I confess my sins. That bottle of medicine would be proof of my sins, and the next door would only open when I revealed my true sins. Blinking again, the smoke had dissipated. In front of me was a very large mirror. Words appeared on the mirror, asking me to look straight at myself. Am I a lamb of God or a devil? I clutched the bottle of medicine. Still didn't understand what this question meant because I only saw myself in the mirror. My answer cracked the mirror. It seemed annoyed and reminded me again. This was a confession to gather each piece to find my true self. As soon as it finished speaking, the mirror immediately shattered. I picked up one of the glass shards, and the words continued to appear, reminding me that if I couldn't recall my sins, it would help me remember those sins, and my job was simply to accept them. Immediately after, I was taken to another strange place. At this moment, a man's voice echoed, asking me to hold the glass shard in my hand to reveal the sins of my past. Immediately, various paintings appeared on the wall. I instantly understood. The voice wanted me to slash these paintings. So I firmly held the glass shard in my hand and slashed all the paintings I saw. The scene changed again. This time, only one painting appeared. A painting of sheep. A familiar voice echoed from the painting. My father and mother flew out, inviting me to go with them. I really wanted to go with them, but I couldn't at this moment. I had to save Zach first. So I took the glass shard and slashed directly at the painting of the sheep family. My parents. Pained screams echoed. The painting bled fresh blood. I took the bottle of medicine I had picked up earlier, collecting every drop of blood here. After that, I was brought back to that dark hallway. I had no more time. I had to quickly find medicine to save Zach. Just one step. I noticed my footprints were bright red, seemingly from blood, but I ignored it and continued forward. Finally, I reached the door of a room emitting strange sounds. I opened the door and entered. Inside was a piano with a book placed on it. The next question for me, what is my sin? If I want to be freed, I will have to offer that sin to God. The most important thing is whether I can recognize my own sin. Reading up to this point, I noticed an angel painting behind the piano. In my head, I calculated very quickly. I needed to defile this angel with the bottle of blood I had obtained earlier. I splattered it directly onto the painting, and the smoke also dissipated. A deafening sound echoed, giving me a severe headache. At this moment, a man appeared behind me, startling me slightly. He introduced himself as Gray, the priest of this church, as well as the overseer of this floor. Gray wanted to know why I was here. I answered in confusion. I wanted to find something to stop the bleeding. Gray knew I was looking for it for Zach, but he also had to remind me that nothing here could stop Zach's bleeding. If I needed those supplies, I would have to go down to Danny's floor. I listened, but still didn't quite understand. Was there a way for that elevator to go down? If I went alone, it would be impossible. But if Gray came along, he would take me down to the lower floor. I was a little worried. This was their first meeting. Would Gray deceive me? As a priest, Gray assured me he would certainly not deceive anyone. However, to get his help, I first had to pass a small test of his. He wanted to know what my true self was, then reminded me not to rush to an answer. He he would wait here for me to find the answer in my heart. I looked very closely at Gray. At this moment, only he could help me, but I still asked Gray for a little time. I needed to report back to Zach first. Gray agreed immediately. I ran out of the room to find Zach crawling in the hallway. He was quite angry that I had left without waking him up. Then I told Zach about the problem they were facing. I needed to go down to the doctor's floor, Danny's floor, to find medicine to stop Zach's bleeding. Of course, Zach wouldn't agree. After all that effort to climb up here, now wanting to go back down, Zach tried to stand up and hold his scythe, but at present, this scythe was too heavy for him, indicating that Zach's body was no longer okay at all. So I knelt down in front of Zach. Just this once, I begged Zach to let me help him. Seeing how earnest I was, Zach gave up. Zach slumped down to discuss another matter. If I wanted to go down to floor B5, it was very likely I would have to go alone, because at this moment, if Zach followed me, he would only die, so he would stay here and sleep for a while. Before I left, Zach had something he wanted to ask me. If possible, he wanted me to go back down to his floor and get him a knife hidden in the room. As soon as he finished speaking, Zach fainted immediately. Having decided, I turned back to express my wish to Gray on the condition that he must not harm Zach. Gray accepted and led me to the elevator. Standing inside, Gray asked me why I was protecting Zach. While answering, I vaguely smelled a familiar scent from him. They had arrived at floor B3, Kathy's floor. Gray reminded me to step out of the elevator, but my request was to go down to Danny's floor. Gray gently sat down and explained to me that to go down to the next floor, I needed to find the power source in this prison and turn it on. But that wouldn't be easy either. This prison was built by Kathy, who imprisoned many criminals seeking repentance here. Now that she was dead, no one could control them anymore. If I wanted to save Zach, I had to find the power source to open the elevator to the next floor. I took responsibility and rushed off immediately. After fumbling around for a while, I found the power source. However, there were too many prisoners here. Seeing me, they rushed to attack, forcing me to draw my gun and shoot in self-defense. I tried to run to Kathy's control room. Entering the room, I was startled to find that the woman's body had disappeared, but there was no time for analysis now. I quickly ran to the control panel, closed the room door first, then aimed the machine guns in the prison at the prisoners. Whoever dared to block my way, I sent them to their maker. I fired, killing everyone until no one stood in my way. Then I stopped. At this moment, Kathy's voice suddenly echoed, mocking me. She thought I was just a soulless child. Who would have thought I would dare to kill others just to save Zach like that? Now Kathy understood. I am very selfish, willing to do anything just so Zach can kill me. With that said, Kathy's shadow disappeared. I no longer cared and quickly ran to flip the switch, then returned to Gray. At this moment, Gray curiously asked me how I managed to turn on this floor's power switch. Did anyone block my way? I frankly admitted that they did. I eliminated all of them, and the simple reason was because they blocked my way. Gray slightly frowned, then continued to lead me down to floor B4. Stepping out of the elevator, Gray immediately guided me. On this floor, I needed to switch on the breaker at the water temperature control. I didn't quite understand why I had to do these things. For Gray, this was part of a test so he could determine what kind of person I was. I implicitly understood his intention. He wanted to probe me, but that was it. At this moment, I discovered that the grave Zach had pushed Eddie into was completely empty, which greatly confused me as to why. But Gray didn't give me time to figure it out. He led me to Eddie's grave collection. Then he told me about the boy's history. To Gray, Eddie was a good child. The graves the boy made on this floor were for the unfortunate. Those people should have rested peacefully in the warm earth here and found salvation. But now, Zach and I had completely destroyed them. That's why Eddie was angry with them. Suddenly, Eddie's laughter echoed again, and the boy appeared before me, startling me. Again, I couldn't understand why I kept encountering the ghosts of the dead. I left, wanting to quickly get out of this floor. Several hands emerged from the ground, grabbing my legs, making me slightly panic. Then I crushed that hand, making its painful scream echo, followed by countless other hands appearing. But I didn't hesitate anymore. I crushed them all and stepped over them. Gray just stood behind, observing. He still couldn't determine whether I was a lost lamb or a demon. I ran down the hallway to the room where Zach had once broken through the wall to save me from Eddie. The water control panel was at the end of this room. I quickly found it and went to open the panel and turn it on. As soon as I pressed it, Eddie's shadow reappeared. He questioned me, asking why I treated those hands that way. They only wanted me to help them find salvation, not to harm me. Once I had done this, Eddie also understood my character. I was very selfish, willing to harm others for my own benefit. Eddie laughed, reminding me that Zach would eventually suffer, just like these people. I was a bit stunned to hear these words from Eddie. I had to compose myself and go back to find Gray. Once again, he asked me about the people who had blocked my path. My answer was still very firm. I would eliminate anyone who dared to stand in my way. Without letting Gray ask further, I urged him to quickly go down to the next floor. Past Eddie's floor, the floor below was Danny's. Stepping out of the elevator, Gray told me about him. Danny, as he knew, was a picky person, but also neat and dedicated. He guessed the medicines were neatly arranged on the shelves. Before Gray could finish speaking, I interrupted him. I asked Gray's permission to go back down to Zach's floor to get something for him. Gray agreed immediately. I just needed to find the medicine on this floor. Then they would go down to Zach's floor. After saying this, Gray left. I stood bewildered. I had been through this place before, but it was also the place that left the deepest impression on me because this was where Zach and I had made a promise. Once I helped Zach escape this building, that's when Zach would send me off. Thinking of this, suddenly something slimy and greenish appeared, frightening me. It chased me, making me just run. I tripped and fell to the ground, and the green thing also disappeared. Without time to think, I ran to the operating room to look for medicine. Dr. Danny's body had also disappeared. As for the medicine, I had torn the whole room apart but found nothing. I continued to other rooms to search, but the result was the same. I ran back to the elevator, panting. When questioned by Gray, I turned to blame him. He told me there was medicine on this floor, but I had searched everywhere and found none. So now I wanted to go back to Zach. Hearing this, Gray blamed me back. Why didn't I think these things were caused by me? All the tragedies of these people were entirely caused by Zach and me. Then he asked me again, did I still want to go down to B6? At least on that floor, I would find the bandages Zach had left. Meanwhile, Zach continued to dream about his childhood scenes. After killing the old couple, Zach immediately left the house and walked on the night road. A car passed by, splashing water on him. The woman in the car got out and apologized to Zach. But when she saw Zach covered in blood with a knife in his hand, it terrified her. And of course, Zach sent her on a peaceful journey. After that, Zach got into the car and slept through the night. It wasn't until the next morning that an old man tapped on the window to wake Zach up. Zach had his knife ready, just waiting for the old man to let his guard down to strike. But when he learned the old man was blind, Zach stopped. When the old man invited him home for a meal, Zach immediately agreed. While eating, he invited Zach to stay with him. The reason was simple. He was lonely and wanted companionship. Zach neither accepted nor refused. So that night, Zach stayed at the old man's house. It was too cold, and Zach had to lie on the sofa. He couldn't sleep, so he got up, grabbed his knife, and snuck into the old man's room. About to act, Zach had to reconsider. Killing this old man now wouldn't end his chill, so Zach changed his target and went into the city. While wandering in an alley, a drunkard brushed past Zach. That was it. This guy's number was up with Zach. After killing the man, Zach's chill still wouldn't end. Annoyed, Zach returned to the old man's house. At this moment, the old man came out of his room and asked Zach where he had been. He reached out and touched Zach's face, immediately recognizing it was blood. Caught, Zach frankly admitted he had just killed someone. Yet this old man showed no surprise or fear, only gently asked Zach what he wanted to do next. The next morning, the old man left home very early. Zach also stayed home, not going out. But by evening, the old man still hadn't returned. So Zach had to go out and look, only to find that the old man had been brutally murdered. The perpetrators were still leisurely counting money from his wallet. Zach appeared before them. Seeing that Zach was just a child, these two weren't scared until Zach pulled out his knife in front of them. Their faces turned pale with fear, but it was too late to run. Zach mercilessly eliminated them. At this moment, he had his answer. What did he want to do? Of course he wanted to kill those with happy faces. Zach stabbed, relishing this exhilarating feeling. Back to reality. Zach was now very weak. A man appeared before Zach. How strange. It was Dr. Danny. Seeing Zach about to die, he decided to help Zach pass away peacefully. Zach immediately woke up with a start. He had clearly killed Danny already, so how on earth was he here? Seeing Zach's confused expression, Danny happily explained. Danny already knew that someone like Zach would surely chase his prey, and Danny's floor was right above Zach's, so he had prepared a little for himself. Danny pulled off his jacket. Inside was a bulletproof vest, thanks to which Danny could withstand one of Zach's slashes. Zach was now furious. If he wasn't dead yet, then he would send him off again now. Zach lunged to attack Danny, then collapsed again. Moving too vigorously made Zach's wound bleed again. Blood gushed out, making Danny laugh maniacally. He advised Zach that he couldn't do anything at the moment, so why didn't they call a truce for a bit? Because Danny, despite his protection, was also injured. Then Danny asked about my whereabouts. Zach just laughed and swore at him. What the hell would make Zach reveal where I was? Then Zach told Danny that he had already killed me. Immediately, Danny's smug expression vanished, replaced by an extremely angry one. Danny cursed Zach for stealing his prey. For a long time, Danny had coveted my eyes. So what right did a piece of trash like Zach have to kill me? Zach didn't care and told Danny that I myself had asked him to kill me, so only Zach could be the one to kill me. These threatening words, delivered with a convincing tone, made Danny burst into laughter. Thanks to these words, Danny confirmed that I was still alive, so he had a new offer for Zach. Not killing me was also fine. He would assign that task to Zach. But after killing me, Zach had to gouge out my eyes and give them to him. If Zach agreed, Danny would treat his wounds. Zach immediately raised his sight. Even after all that was said, Zach still didn't understand. He didn't care if my eyes were beautiful or anything, at least not for Danny. But to him, people needed to have their eyes, whether alive or dead. Therefore, Zach refused Danny's offer. Danny didn't force Zach to do anything and turned to leave. Zach badly wanted to strike this guy, but his wound worsened, losing too much blood. Zach immediately collapsed. Meanwhile, Gray took me down to B6. I quickly remembered what Zach had told me and immediately ran to the place where I first met Zach. Next to it was also the room Zach used. Entering the room was a messy sight. It was very cluttered with only a single sofa and a thin blanket. Sleeping on this must be cold, I suddenly thought. Then I rummaged through the drawers looking for medicine and bandages. There was no medicine, only bandages. While looking around the room, I found a crumpled piece of paper on the floor. As far as I knew, Zach was illiterate, so what was this? I was curious. I picked up the knife on the table, then returned to Gray. They went back to B2 together. I hurried to look for Zach, but couldn't find him anywhere. I turned to look at Gray, and he immediately denied it. According to the agreement, he had promised not to touch Zach, so he knew nothing about these matters. But one thing was for sure, these things happened because I was here. Gray asked me a question. Had I seen Dr. Danny's body anywhere? Of course I hadn't. I believed Danny was dead, but Gray didn't think so. Danny was a careful person, so he must still be alive. I didn't care. At this moment, I just wanted to save Zach. As soon as I turned to leave, I was stopped by Gray. Ever since I appeared in this building, everything had been disrupted by me. Gray had been observing me for a long time. So if I did anything evil, he would be the one to condemn me. But my going to find medicine for Zach made him reconsider a bit. But perhaps Gray had placed his hopes in the wrong place. Gray sighed, lamenting that after the trip to find medicine with me, he had confirmed that I was a selfish and cruel person. So once again, Gray had to ask me, why would a cruel person like me want to save Zach? My answer was still the same. It was still that Zach had sworn to God that he would kill me. Therefore, I had to save Zach so he could fulfill his vow. Gray rushed towards me and questioned, not every vow is witnessed by God. Many people have sworn to God, but how many have fulfilled those vows? And what is the evidence that Zach will also keep his vow? That's enough talk. It's time to judge me. Gray opened his Bible. Smoke rose from the Bible, stinging my eyes. When I opened my eyes, I saw a giant snake appear before me, making me run away in fear. I rushed into a room and saw Zach heavily dragging his side. I was too scared and ran to urge Zach to run faster, or the snake would eat them. Zach angrily pushed me down, and only then did the illusion disappear. I thought I would bring back some good news. Who knew I would end up like this? Zach sat down. I quickly apologized to him for not being able to find medicine. Zach already knew this because that Danny guy had taken all the medicine. What he cared about now was what he had asked me to get for him. It was the knife from B6 that I had brought back. I took it out of my bag and gave it to Zach. Zach happily took it and told me this was the first weapon he had ever used. Holding it again made Zach feel much more at ease. Now let's continue the journey. Zach wanted to stand up and move, but I stopped him. I also brought back bandages, so at least I had to bandage Zach first. Zach yelled, not letting me touch him. As that pervert Kathy said about Zach, he is a monster, and monsters usually have a lot of stamina. So I don't need to worry about that. Zach stood up and reminded me that there was no medicine. The only option was to keep moving. If I didn't want to go, he would leave me here. So I pointed to the ground where there was a trail of blood. This must definitely be Danny's blood. After reaching Zach, just follow it. They can find him and there will be medicine for Zach. Both walked in the dark corridor. At this point, I spoke up and asked Zach why he kept calling himself a monster. Zach immediately asked me back, what, in my opinion, are humans like? What must one do to become human? And if he is a monster, then why would I regret letting a monster kill me? Hearing this, I immediately denied it. I didn't mean that. Seeing me so serious made Zach not bother teasing anymore. Walking a bit further, I started to wonder again, but this time I wondered about myself. I didn't even know what I was anymore. Zach looked at me with a confused expression. Ever since I came back from getting medicine, I had been acting strangely. Both reached a crossroads when I discovered a slashed painting. Curious, I ran over to examine it. When a white snake darted out from inside, Zach reacted very quickly, running to push me aside, then urged me to quickly find a way out. I understood Zach's meaning and immediately ran to look. When I found the door leading to the exit, the snake also stopped fighting Zach and slithered back into the crack in the wall. Zach heavily dragged his scythe towards me, then suddenly started when he noticed a gap above my head. The white snake plunged down to attack me. Once again, Zach mustered all his strength, rushed forward, and cut the snake in half, saving me. After that attack, Zach completely collapsed. He couldn't move anymore. I tried to convince Zach to sit here and rest so I could go find Danny and bring medicine back for him. Only at this point did Zach ask me what had happened to me. Why had I been like this since returning? And with that guilty look on my face, going alone, I would only die. I still tried to convince Zach that I had a gun for self-defense. Zach yelled and snatched my gun. There were no bullets left, so what was I going to defend myself with? Zach sighed and questioned me. Is it because of the promise to kill me that I care about his life and death? I'm truly foolish. There is no such thing as God in this world. I didn't believe this and quickly denied what Zach said, but even so, I couldn't prove that God existed. Zach didn't argue with me anymore and collapsed. He wanted to sleep. I can do whatever I want. Before I left, Zach gave me his knife. He didn't know if I could use this, but at least it would be useful for me. I took the knife and swore to Zach that this time I would be useful to him. I gripped the knife Zach gave me tightly. I was determined to find Dr. Danny and bring back medicine to save Zach. Following the blood trail, I entered a dark corridor. Running only a short distance, I saw a rabbit appear before me. I curiously chased after the rabbit. Then I fell straight down a very deep hole. When I woke up, I found myself lying in a coffin with little Eddie in front of me, welcoming me back. I frowned, reminding Eddie not to get in my way. I had to go find medicine to save Zach. Of course, Eddie would not agree. He kicked the coffin lid, locking me inside. But this alone would not deter my determination. With the knife Zach gave me, I stabbed the coffin lid once. Immediately, the scene before my eyes changed to Kathy's interrogation room. I was tied tightly to a chair. Kathy appeared, laughing wildly. Then she electrocuted me, making me scream in pain. The pain didn't last long. When I opened my eyes again, I was taken to another room. Inside, there was only a mirror. The face in the mirror was Kathy's. Not letting anyone stand in my way, I took the knife and stabbed directly into the mirror. But then that face turned into Zach's, startling me. I knelt down, beginning to remember what Gray had warned. What if God doesn't accept Zach's vow, and Zach doesn't even believe God is real? Then who will fulfill the promise between me and Zach if Zach dies? I couldn't stand it anymore and screamed that I wanted to stop. Immediately, I was taken back to Gray's church. He stood before me curiously, asking why I came here alone. Had I abandoned Zach? I didn't bother to answer, only suggesting that Gray revealed Dr. Danny's whereabouts. Gray didn't know Danny's whereabouts, but due to some of Danny's cruel actions, Gray had confiscated his medicine. So Gray currently had the medicine, however he wouldn't easily give it to me. I trembled and pointed the knife at Gray's face. Gray just smiled gently, reminding me. I dared to hold Zach's knife to confront him. Gray knew everything even if I didn't say it because he was the one who brought Zach to this building. My vision started to blur again. Gray's shadow dissolved into a purple mist. Only his voice remained. First, about Dr. Danny. He was a calm and careful person, only acting if it benefited himself. And what about Zach? To him, Zach was very innocent and simple. It was only because of my desire to kill that Zach had to endure all these injuries. Gray accused me that it was all my fault. Once again, Gray spoke up and asked me, who am I and what do I want? I couldn't answer this question, so he assumed I was the mastermind behind everything, a witch who caused chaos in this building. He decided to judge me right now. In a flash, I was brought to trial. Gray, in front of the audience, began to accuse me. Of course, I would not confess my guilt, so he invited a few witnesses, making it difficult for me to refute. In turn, Kathy, little Eddie, and Dr. Danny appeared as witnesses. They argued over who had the right to accuse me first. Then, Gray decided to let Kathy go first because she had the reason of being the most affected person. Kathy smiled and declared that I had used my innocent face to deceive others. As Gray said, she also confirmed that I was a witch. She knew I wouldn't confess, so she had prepared evidence. Kathy turned on the remote control to play a video of Zach and me participating in her dollhouse challenge. At that time, I had ordered Zach to follow my words. Therefore, Kathy believed that I only saw Zach as a tool. If that wasn't enough, Kathy showed Gray a video of me shooting her. Kathy was very angry about this and cursed at my face. She was a judge, yet she was killed by a criminal. If I wasn't a witch, then what was I? At this moment, Dr. Danny appeared, running to stop Kathy. He smiled, asking Kathy to play the rest of the video, the part after that. In this part, after being shot, Kathy laughed. She was shot and still laughed. Clearly, Kathy was happy to be shot. So why blame me like that? Kathy was stubborn, unable to refute Danny, so she turned to Gray for help. She still accused me of being a witch and she wanted my punishment to be drowning. Immediately after that, a stream of water engulfed me. I stood in it but still showed no fear, which made Kathy angry, cursing loudly. "This is enough." Gray slammed the table, dispersing the stream of water, then turned to threaten Kathy. "This is a courtroom, not a prison." Yet Kathy brought her habit of torturing prisoners here, so he expelled Kathy. The next person to accuse me was little Eddie. Eddie stepped forward and began his speech. He knew I was the one who buried the bird on Zach's floor, so from then on, Eddie felt that he and I were very similar. When Eddie knew I wanted to die, he built a beautiful grave for me, covered with roses, just to fulfill my wish. But I was a bit stubborn. I didn't listen to Eddie's advice, only listened to Zach, and eventually killed him. When lying in that grave, Eddie realized that I was just a selfish person. A selfish person willing to harm others just to fulfill their own desires. Therefore, Eddie determined that I was a witch, and the punishment Eddie wanted for me was execution by stabbing. Immediately, I was hung up. Below appeared a very dangerous spiked trap. But even so, I still said nothing to Eddie. So Eddie spoke again, asking me if I wanted anything. He would do everything for me. At this moment, Gray shouted for Eddie to stop. He had heard all of Eddie's accusations, though they were very convincing. But his recent act of caring for me made him uneasy. Why did Eddie still care about the person who killed him? It seemed that, in Eddie's heart, he was still obsessed with me. That's why he decided to strip Eddie of his right to judge right now, without letting Eddie refuse. The next person, Dr. Danny, stepped forward. He smiled, sighing that it was finally his turn. Here he confidently asserted that he understood me best, so he deliberately came last. It all started when he met me during the interview. At that time, Danny was looking for a perfect pair of eyes, a pair of eyes that were clearly still alive but seemed dead inside. And then Danny met me, someone whose eyes matched his imagination. Danny approached me to look into my face. That's right, exactly, this soulless face. It proved that my soul could no longer be saved. Danny started laughing wildly like a madman. Only when Gray spoke did he stop. After that, he dismissed all the witnesses and began his judgment. He had listened very carefully to the testimonies of the witnesses just now. Therefore, he also declared that I was a witch, selfish, only thinking of myself, harming those who cared for and loved me. Although I denied it, Gray decided my punishment. And my punishment was to be burned alive. Immediately, I was tied to a cross. A ring of fire appeared at my feet and burned fiercely. I screamed in fear, but at this moment, Gray no longer cared about me. No one believes the words of a witch. Gray confirmed that I had corrupted the angels in this building, including Zach, who was always by my side. He was sure that Zach would eventually sacrifice himself for my selfishness. Once again, Gray advised me to confess my guilt. Confess, and he would grant me the sacred flame to bring me into the arms of God. I still adamantly denied it. The God I knew would never force an innocent person like this. That was not written in the Bible. At this moment, Gray gave an evil smile. What I said was true, but only for me because my God did not exist. His God was different. In this building, Gray considered himself God. And since God had judged me, I had to accept it. I closed my eyes tightly, not wanting to hear anymore. This priest, claiming to be God, was ridiculous. I also felt I was wrong to trust him. I didn't want to hear his nonsense anymore. I was gradually engulfed by darkness. But just then, Zach appeared, slashing through the curtain of night that enveloped me, then grabbed my hand and ran very fast. But they only went a short distance before I stumbled. By the time I looked up, Zach had disappeared, leaving only his scythe and bandages. I tried to crawl to the pile of bandages. Outside, I was fiercely burning, very hot. But now I felt incredibly cold. Holding those rolls of bandages in my hand, I couldn't understand what that feeling was. I looked up again to see Zach dragging the scythe and leaving. At this moment, I realized that I had destroyed what I cherished, destroyed the person who always wanted to help me. With all my courage, I tightly gripped the bandages and called Zach. I remembered now. I woke up to find myself still burning, but now I had the knife Zach gave me. I gently cut my finger with the blade. The pain hit, and Gray's illusion immediately vanished. This greatly confused Gray. He couldn't believe I was so strong. I pointed the knife at Gray's face. From the beginning, he had used illusions to mislead me. Although I had denied everything, now I had found my God. Gray sighed, blaming himself for not being strong enough to purify a witch like me. At this moment, I didn't want to talk to him anymore. I pointed the knife at Gray's face, asking him to hand over the medicine. So Gray led me to a secret room. I still kept the knife at his side. I didn't know what tricks Gray might pull, so I let him go in first to be safe. The door opened, and sure enough, there was medicine inside. From hemostatic medicine to blood-producing medicine, everything was available. I ran in, collected everything into my bag, then turned to leave. At this moment, Gray spoke, asking me if I intended to kill him. He knew I wasn't such a kind person. With an emotionless face, I turned back to remind him that if he didn't block my way, I wouldn't need to kill Gray simply because I didn't need him. Hearing this, Gray smiled and advised me he hoped that the god I had just recognized would not hinder me on my next journey. After that, I rushed to bring the medicine back to Zach. Zach was still leaning against the wall, clutching his wound, breathing heavily with difficulty. Seeing that, I let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Zach was still alive. I quickly took the medicine out of my bag, washed my hands with disinfectant, then began to give first aid to Zach's wound, removing his bandages. I found a burn mark on Zach's stomach. Just then, Zach also woke up. Having a child like me bring back medicine made Zach quite uncomfortable, but he reiterated once again that he really didn't need these things. Zach tried to get up and move, but I firmly stopped him. I hadn't stitched Zach's wound yet, even though Zach didn't want it. Looking into my determined eyes, he gave up and let me do whatever I wanted. At this moment, Zach suddenly asked me why I did so much just to save him. I just stared at Zach's knife and praised its beauty, which made Zach angry, not allowing me to change the subject anymore. So I looked straight at Zach, telling him that he was my god. This statement startled Zach, but I was very firm with my words. The reason I thought so was because Zach had always supported me, and it was the knife Zach gave me that saved my life. I threaded the needle and began to stitch Zach's wound. Just the first stitch made Zach jump up in pain. I didn't think Zach would react like this just for a little pain. This annoyed Zach a bit and he scolded me. If I really thought he was God, then I should be careful and stitch the wound more gently. While stitching, I asked about Zach's burn, but he didn't answer, only urged me to hurry so they could move on. Finally, I finished stitching. Zach spoke up to praise me, only to see me drenched in sweat. My eyes starting to roll. Knowing I was exhausted, Zach no longer urged me, but let me lean against the wall and rest for a moment. Meanwhile, he sat next to me, staring intently. By the time I woke up, Zach was able to stand up and walk normally. Seeing me awake, Zach urged me to find the elevator and get out of here. I had run around this floor several times, but still didn't know where the elevator was. So I led Zach to the large church where I met Father Gray. At this point, Zach curiously asked me how I got Gray to give me the medicine. He was sure it wasn't easy. I thought so too. But perhaps the reason Gray agreed to give the medicine was because Gray had a little affection for Zach. Upon hearing this, Zach immediately vomited. I didn't care and continued moving. I led Zach into the secret room where Gray used to hide the medicine, and indeed, the elevator was also located here, but it was currently locked tight. Zach started to lose patience. How do we open it now? I noticed a button next to the elevator. I pressed it and the door opened, so both stepped inside and went up to the next floor. Standing in the elevator, I again became curious about Zach's burn. This was not an interesting story, so Zach didn't want to tell it. But because I kept insisting, Zach reluctantly briefly told me about this burn. When he was young, he was burned by someone he lived with. Zach didn't clearly remember the face and information of this person, but it was probably his mother's lover. He wanted to kill Zach, but fortunately Zach didn't die. After that, his mother wrapped Zach up like a corpse and sold him for money to support that scumbag. After listening, I also found it not interesting at all, so I changed the subject. This time I asked Zach again if he really wanted to get out of this building. Zach uncomfortably asked me back if he didn't want to get out of here. Why would he take so many risks? Zach also knew exactly what I was talking about and encouraged me. He hated liars, and the promise Zach had made he would definitely fulfill it as long as they could both escape this building. And I had a slight expression on my face. He would kill me immediately. At this moment, I suddenly remembered scenes from my past. A murder had occurred right before my eyes. I really wanted to tell this story to Zach, but after considering for a while, I decided against it. Both stepped out of the elevator. They had arrived at floor B1. I still just followed Zach, walking and reminding myself to keep that secret because Zach hated liars. If I told him this, Zach would hate me. Zach bent down to the floor and immediately recognized it was blood. I froze, remembering Gray's warning. God also hates deceit. I broke out in a cold sweat, recognizing this scene. Wasn't this where all my tragedies happened? I wanted to stop Zach from going further, but it was too late. Zach calmly opened the door and stepped inside. Seeing me just standing there with a bewildered face, he had to call me. Then Zach began to check around. This place looked exactly like a normal house. However, on the sofa were the corpses of a couple. At their feet was a large basket of flowers, which Zach immediately recognized as fake. Just as Zach was about to touch the couple, I spoke up to stop him. We don't know what this place is, so it's best Zach doesn't touch things randomly. Zach didn't care and continued to touch the couple. At this point, I was terrified. I screamed, called Zach, then clasped my hands and begged him, pleading with Zach to kill me now. Zach looked confused and replied to me. Since entering this place, I had become abnormal. As promised, Zach would only kill me when they escaped this place. Now my task was to find a way to escape first. Zach turned and left while I continued to plead as soon as I saw a book on the floor. I was so scared that I fainted. Zach worriedly sat down and called me, but I didn't wake up. Seeing that I seemed scared of the book down there, Zach picked it up and looked through it, but he couldn't read. Zach threw the book away and started to hear a strange sound coming from the room right there. Zach carefully opened the door and rushed in. Inside, there was only a strange toy. Not knowing what it was, Zach advanced, unaware that Danny had set an ambush here. Just waiting for Zach to pass, he jumped out and ran in the opposite direction from where Zach had just arrived. Then he immediately closed the door, separating Zach and me. Now Danny was in control, so Zach's threats had no effect on Danny. Although Zach used his scythe to break the door, it seemed this door was harder than usual. At this point, Danny began to tell Zach about this mysterious house. This is where I kept my treasures. It's ridiculous that someone like Zach was chosen by me as my master. While Zach knew nothing about me, Danny picked up the book that Zach had just thrown away and reminded him that this floor contained many of my secrets. If Zach could find those secrets, Danny would give Zach a chance to escape this building, but only Zach alone. As for me, Danny declared that from now on, he would take care of me instead of Zach. Zach shouted, kicked the door, and called me awake, but I remained motionless. Danny still advised Zach that if he wanted to escape from here, it was best to obey. Zach used all his strength, but the door still wouldn't open, so he had to follow Danny's words. He ran back to look for information about this floor. Zach went up the stairs. There were 2 rooms here. The first room was locked. Only the second room could still be opened. Zach stepped in, and as soon as he touched the photo on the table, the ceiling collapsed on Zach's head. Fortunately, Zach reacted fast enough to jump out of the room. But that wasn't all. Zach discovered something had just been shot out. In just a second, Zach used his scythe to block all the arrows shot at him. Then he rushed forward and smashed that damn mechanism. There was nothing else up here. Zach went down to the kitchen. On the table was a pizza. Zach wasn't foolish enough to touch this pizza. He kicked the table, then discovered a secret passage under the table. Zach began to search around. He went into the bathroom and saw the bathtub still full of water. Zach turned off the water and smiled. These puzzle games couldn't stump him. Zach bent down to pick up the key, but was bitten on the hand by a piranha. At this point, Zach was very annoyed. He quickly opened the basement door and went down. 2 dogs accidentally appeared, helping Zach vent his frustration. Following the dark corridor, Zach found a room. But as soon as he got very close, the floor collapsed. Below was a deadly trap designed. If Zach fell, his entire body would immediately become a honeycomb. Fortunately, Zach's scythe was long enough to hook onto the floor for Zach to hold onto. With all his might, Zach wanted to climb up. But for some reason, at this moment, footsteps came very close to Zach. Meanwhile, on my side, I had just woken up. Only Danny was here. There was no sign of Zach, which made me very worried and want to run to find Zach. Of course, Danny wouldn't allow me to leave here. He stopped me, reminding me that all I could do now was sit and wait. As for Zach, he couldn't die. Zach would have to live to find the secret I was keeping here. Danny laughed wildly while I was speechless, unable to refute anything. As for Zach, at this moment, he couldn't hold on any longer and fell. Just then, Gray appeared, saving Zach's life. Because Zach was not good with abstract explanations, Gray decided to explain his presence here in the simplest way possible. From a young age, Gray had been exposed to God and believers. However, not everyone was pure and innocent. Most of them just exploited God for personal gain. It was disgusting. So Gray decided to take on God's role himself. This building was designed for Gray to conduct his experiments. He built 7 floors to find out who was an angel, who was a demon, and to judge them. Eddie, Kathy, and Danny all had their own agendas. Only Zach just knew how to kill people. Simple and foolish. But precisely because of this, Gray wanted to turn Zach into an angel. At first, Zach only wanted to escape from here by himself. But now, Gray knew Zach would only escape if I went with him. That's why he was here, to ask Zach why he had changed. Hearing this, Zach immediately recalled all the moments he had spent with me. However, Zach didn't want to answer Gray. Gray didn't force Zach to do anything, only declared that I and Zach could become his new observation subjects. Everything he had just said, Zach probably couldn't understand. It's still too early, but once Zach finds the secret here, he will understand. Also, Gray wanted to ask about Zach's feelings. When I called him God, Zach frowned, feeling those words were foolish. Everyone in this building is equally foolish. Zach didn't want to hear anymore, urging Gray to tell him what he needed to do next. Gray sighed, then instructed Zach that he needed to go into the room upstairs. That room was locked and would only open if Zach placed a nameplate on the door. The nameplate was right behind Zach. As for me, Danny had now turned on the screen for me to see. Cameras were also installed on this floor, so just by being here, he knew all of Zach's actions. Zach entered the room. This place was even messier than his own room. Zach immediately noticed the photo on the table. This was a picture of me and my family. Next to the photo was a box. Danny now started laughing maniacally. Soon, Zach would discover the truth about me. Zach fumbled for a while and finally figured out how to open the box. Inside was a nameplate. Zach compared it to the photo and confirmed that it was indeed my nameplate. Unable to delay any longer, Zach started running back to the second floor. Danny grew increasingly excited, waiting for Zach to open that room. Meanwhile, I, taking advantage of his distraction, slipped out of the room, rushed to the second floor, wanting to stop Zach from entering, but it was too late. Danny also appeared right behind me and held me back. Zach entered the room wondering if this was my room. Everything in this room was fake, which irritated Zach. Danny had brought me back to their room. Just as Zach hadn't found any clues, the TV in the room suddenly turned on, showing Zach a news report about the Gardner grandparents' house. Police found their bodies, shot and stabbed multiple times, then sewn back together with needles. Both were already dead when found, with only their daughter, me, still alive, but the shock seemed to have made me lose my emotions. My image appeared on the screen just as Danny was laughing maniacally, while Zach seemed to have discovered the secret I had been hiding.